The problem really going after the logical explanation, logical storytelling and rationales is that they close the door to possibilities opening and finding the true reason or more accurate reason, or finding a high percentage of the true reasoning why something happening.
So yes, a lot. We as consultants are also experts in post-rationalization.
Yeah.
Of course we are, but it has to be put into the right context. It has to be adapted to them, to what they're facing. And then it has to be presented by the right person in the right way for them.
Why don't you tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do, who you're working with?
Yeah, by all means. I'm Emily St. Clair Johnson. I'm a partner at Ogilvy Consulting. I specialize, or have always specialized, in the sweet spot whenever I can find it between strategy and innovation. And that encompasses a whole lot of things intentionally. I also have a healthy, I think it's healthy, preoccupation with human psychology. I studied it when I was younger. I've made a point of studying it since, whenever I can, and applying it whenever I can, and getting involved wherever I can with people who know far more than me about it, because it lights a fire inside me. And like we've talked about before, it just simply makes sense. As soon as you hear it, as a human, it makes sense. But I think it's not listened to as much as it should be. Well, where am I from? I'm from a tiny village in Sussex originally, where I was born. And then I went to school in Brighton, and then I went to university in York, and then I lived in London, and now I live in Hampshire. And in between, I've lived in other countries too, not for very long. So just a few brief frays into South Africa, where I volunteered for a little bit, and then various places across Europe too. And yeah, I think any conversation that rests, as I hope this one will, on what is important for people and humans and what will help us thrive in the future in some way, I think is just really rich and should be talked about and explored lots and lots.
You're talking about the psychology, and you mentioned that. What I think it's really interesting, anytime when you say something that is psychologically optimized or psychologically truth, right? Most of the people will say, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. But they never really take it seriously. And as soon as you tell them, they just return back to the original thinking. We're kind of trained that way, right? So I'm guiding toward my first question. I'm naming it rational alibi versus real reasoning. How we are capable, very capable, extremely capable, post-rationalizing our thoughts and what we think and what's just happened. In instant, we are justifying it and we glorifying it. Those who are really capable of telling us what just happened, giving us rational story, beautiful story, more beautiful and more rational story it is, the better stick with us. Sure. So the question is why businesses explain decisions logically even when behavior tells a very different story.
Yeah.
And I think you're best person I can ask these.
I very much doubt that, but I'm glad you have asked me. Yeah, and you mentioned the phrase rational alibis before, which I think is just such a beautiful phrase in itself. Could spend about an hour talking about it. But I mean, that I think we seek safety most of all as humans. So when you can find an element of safety or what we think is predictable or secure or non-changing, because we all don't like change, even if we say we do, then I think we lean into it. And businesses especially, why they explain decisions logically, because they find safety in that logic. It feels, and I'm not saying it feels less risky, less alienating to other people, less polarizing potentially, and more predictable. And even maybe it feels more measurable, which all is totally ironic because logic, I think, I mean, I'm a huge fan of logic, but I also recognize it's very subjective. Logic is not factual. It's an element that you find by weaving things together in a way that makes sense in your head, not necessarily anyone else's, potentially. And it's largely based on opinions and feelings. So wouldn't it be better, and maybe we're now guiding each other, to find something that isn't based on only on opinions and subjection, but actually based on how our brains work, is probably, like you say in your question, the most predictable, and is, I think, behavior is probably one of the why I find it so interesting is because it demonstrates so much truth, actually. You behave in a way because of certain reasons, whereas logic can be sort of cleaned and post-rationalized and played out in a very, very different, neat, easy to digest way, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. So I think where decisions are made or where decisions are post-rationalized, it's very easy to rest on logic and look back with hindsight and say, yes, this is the reason we made those decisions. It worked or it didn't work because of X, Y, Z, even if behavior is pulling you in a different direction, because it doesn't come with so much apparent risk to do that. And therefore people feel more secure in doing it.
Well, you're talking about not feeling comfortable getting into the deeper psychological argument because it feels like we're touching something that we shouldn't, or going down a path that makes most of the people uncomfortable, which is amazing, right? So, and we are basically dedicating an entire episode of this podcast to this fact, right? That uncomfort that we carefully have to package into some sort of logical reasoning so that we can present it back to the clients. The problem really going after the logical explanation, logical storytelling and the rationales is that they close the door to possibilities opening and finding the true reason or more accurate reason, or finding a higher percentage of the true reasoning why something happening. And if we know why something happened, if we know true the problem of something, we can scale it up, it's replicated, etc. So that leads us to the second question is how and when to introduce behavioral science to client. To me, it was always magical, right? I'm going to show them up front, basically how to write proposal, right? I think most of the people who are in the behavioral science, practicing behavioral science, they already kind of know it, and so they burn themselves. They kind of expecting what you're going to say. So not saying it up front, relieving it after versus leading with, and what each approach unlocks and breaks. How to write proposal, basically. How to present.
Yeah. And it links with that point you just made about people feeling comfortable. I think it varies hugely, and you have to some extent, get to know your client and their mindset and their objectives and their intent before you decide whether to land it on them up front or introduce it to them up front, or whether it becomes a very, what I would call a very potent ingredient within. And it isn't just taking what they say at face value either, because we can have very many clients approach us and brief us or ask us a question. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the question. You have to dig a bit. You really have to dig, because sometimes the brief is not the brief at all. The brief is a question you'll ask 2 hours, 2 weeks into that, getting to know that client and uncover it's an entirely different problem that they're grappling with. So I think, first of all, it's on us to get to know our clients a little bit better, to understand what actually is the difficulty or the problem or the crux of the issue. And then deciding if behavioral science is the most important element of trying to solve it. I believe, I mean, it plays a role in most things, to be honest, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the be all and end all. It can be a really wonderful ingredient of all of it. I wouldn't ever keep it a secret, weave it in without them knowing. I think that can feel sometimes a bit like trickery, which it isn't. Behavioral science is not magic and smoke and mirrors into the nth detail about it. And if they are open, you'll know that you can push it a little harder or start with it, depending on whether their eyes light up or they nod or they say, oh my goodness, I never thought of it that way. Does that actually work? And then the approach, I mean, again, they each have benefits and downsides. Often, I think, including it as an ingredient, integrating it more, applying it more, is sometimes more lucrative than leading with it too much and only leading with it, because we're often talking to clients that the problem that they're talking to us about is one of many, and they aren't often psychologists themselves or behavioral scientists themselves. So You have to show how it fits into the bigger whole and the holistic environment they're in, and therefore why it's useful most of all. What will it lead to? What will it give them? What are the tangible results in combination with other things? And the other things will vary too. Is it in combination with a huge amount of creativity? Is it in combination with business strategy or growth plan or engaging their employees? Or is it in combination with the fact that they're getting ready to sell and they need an element of psychology in their sales presentation to persuade someone very difficult that they want to buy? So it can be an unlock in so many different ways, but I think for me at least, it should always be in combination with other elements.
Cool. Just a brief question. In terms of wrapping, how much of percentage-wise are you doing all these? How much you really creating, post-rationalizing the research? It's kind of my personal question to you.
How much
So you can really present it to the client so they understand, okay, well, there's a business rationale behind it. It's not some lost aversion.
A lot, honestly, because
Yeah.
without changing the information and falsely presenting it, it needs to be presented in a way that feels relevant for them.
Yeah.
That will change. So yes, a lot. We as consultants are also experts in post-rationalization.
Yeah.
Of course we are. But it has to be put into the right context. It has to be adapted to them, to what they're facing. And then it has to be presented by the right person in the right way for them. You can't just chuck it at them and expect them to catch it. They won't. And they'll probably find you quite annoying if you do.
I just want to move it a little bit further and in slightly different direction. And that it's pretty much the same thing. So why behavioral science is still labeled soft tool? It's probably secondary or tertiary, or it's nice. Oh, that's cute. Oh, that's an interesting idea. And it always feels like it is a secondary idea to something. It's like a, different way of thinking, right? It's like a thinking outside the box. Well, actually, the truth is, it is a main idea. It's a main dish, right? It's not something that comes after or before or during. It's a main dish of the dinner. So calling it soft, right here in my question, despite being the most predictable and actionable level in decision making and growth. The point here is that human nature, the psychology is in, and look at this through the sense of predictability, it's probably the most predictable aspect of the business, and that is a human aspect, psychology, right? So why are we taking it so as a soft side, as something that is side dish?
I think, maybe, I don't know for sure, but I think a lot of people don't fully understand it. And so, as you mentioned before, it feels uncomfortable, but it also seems very individual, very personal, also sometimes intrusive. If you get down to a deeper psychological layer, I think some people will back away from it because it feels like it's invading on elements that they don't really want to talk about or open up to. And I think typically businesses do look for the most predictable, but they also look for the most measurable, easy to define elements. That's how they measure their growth. It's in numbers, it's not often in feelings. So I think when it comes to behavioral science, psychology, it's easier to label it as soft and nice to have rather than must have, because if they labeled it as anything else, they would have to do it and they would therefore feel forced into having to dig in deeper and also follow it through. I think a lot of people are intrigued by it, super interested by it, want to do it, but don't go as far as they need to go to see the results that would make it more compelling, that would switch the behavior in the long term. They'll do an element of it and then stop and do the other processes, other approaches that they're more familiar with, that have been maybe tried and tested in the past, but will fail to work at some point as things around them change. In terms of that predictability, I think it's long term as well. Behavioral science, behavior change, it's long term. It's not going to be we'll try this today and by next week you'll see some wonderful results and therefore it's tangible and you can buy it again and again and again. It takes time. It takes years to shift. It takes decades to shift culture. It takes years to shift human behavior. So you've got to commit, and that is uncomfortable and expensive. Honestly, that will be a barrier too. the investment of time and money that does come with having to commit for the long term puts up a barrier, and therefore sometimes, not often with our conversations.
Yeah, you and I spoke about that, and you wrote an article recently about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I think there is a primal wealth unlocked sitting below us. I truly believe in just looking at the measurables, and you saying how people go after what's immeasurable, right? What's predictable and measurable, what makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think what actually behavioral science approach really brings is it's highly measurable, long term and short term.
Yeah.
It's all about that, right? It's right there in front of us. Yeah, so it is a little bit comfortable, uncomfort, and embracing new. That's open up a whole another conversation. But let's focus on the branding. Let's focus on what we really do here.
Yeah.
Branding as applied behavioral science. How brand work becomes the safest, most effective way to influence a behavior without triggering resistance.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I've made a career out of finding elements of branding that I can impact, or we can impact, I shouldn't say. I don't do it on my own. I think brands are incredibly useful bridges for people. Bridges between so many things, and increasingly bridges between so many different things, between logic and emotion, between people and commercials, between many other things that, I won't list out effectively. But when it comes to behavioral science and using or leveraging brand as a way to apply it, I think it can make that deep psychology and all of the logic and the irrefutable evidence that we see more immediate, more strategic, more shareable, less academic in some cases. I will read articles till the cows come home. I love it, but some people don't. Some people do not want to spend a long time immersed in evidence and hard to understand concepts. They want something served up to them quickly, immediately, and in an easy to digest way. And I think brands can help do that because it makes behavioral science and psychology or applied psychology feel more tangible, feel more relevant, possibly feel a bit less, aloof. And you can then, like I said before, interweave it, integrate it into so many parts of the brand and the brand journey, whether it's understanding your consumer and your audiences up front, whether it's changing habits, whether it's saying the right thing in the right way to get people to think differently and reframe how they thought of something in the past.
Framing, messaging.
I mean, the list goes on and on, whether it's pricing, commercial strategy, whether it's
business models,
already engagement, anything. You can use
anything.
It in so many different ways, but by attaching it to a brand or making it that vital ingredient within a brand, I think it just widens the ecosystem of how you can apply it and also who will be receptive to it. And people are not resistant to brands. They feel fine with brands because it's an element they've known for many, many years now, and it's an element they all buy into already, regardless of where they live or what their job title is. You attach it to a brand and you've opened a door that you might not have had open to you before. But I wouldn't bury it so much that it starts becoming a hidden aspect of that brand like before. I think it's important to softly coach people as you move so that they do understand there's an element of psychology at play and it works. And it's as acceptable isn't the right word, as compelling as brands are, even more so, because it's probably one of the most universal elements you will ever find, whereas brands are still polarizing, subjective, and fleeting in so many cases too. Human psychology is not. It's not fleeting. I hope.
That was amazing. I wasn't expecting such a shift, but that's really amazing. And of course, I have a question about what is really happening with the technology that's surrounding us these days, right? We're talking of 2026, beginning of 2026 now, and having a true, disruption, or however we want to call these. What is the AI change and what it makes more human? Does it make it more human? I will argue it does, but I will leave this to you. As a machine optimized logic, why intuition, judgment, and psychology became the real competitive edge. I think you just wrote similar article in that territory that speaks about that.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, it will to be a bit of a double-edged sword for me. We obviously have adopted and embraced and are helping others to do the same AI across Ogilvy WPP. It still astonishes me what we can do with it that we weren't able to do before. It's amazing, phenomenal in so many respects, incredibly time-saving, empowering in so many respects. And I believe fully that the human craft element shouldn't disappear. It should be an ever-present element or punctuation point throughout the journey. We use agents, agentic thinking, AI, throughout a lot of what we do now, but there is not a moment where there isn't a reloop or a pressure test through humans, through our own domain expertise with our own brains, because to remove it entirely removes any, or it increases the risk of us making damaging generalizations. And also, it's been shown to make many errors still. Of course, AI hallucinates. We know it does. So the caution or the craft that needs to be there should always be there. I think as machine thinking optimizes, it's more important than ever that it's done in tandem with human brains. I don't think yet AI can fully emulate our brains, luckily. I think it goes some way to doing so in some respects, but our brains are just phenomenal things that are a culmination of so much more than prompts and what already exists across the web that we can distill and what we can feed. It's a culmination of all of our experience, post-rationalized memories. We remember them in a different way, right? They might not have happened like that. We still remember them in a different way. That's what is the fabric of how we see the world. Our expertise.
Hindsight.
Exactly. Hindsight, something that happened 5 minutes ago when I was walking across our path, for instance, which no one else encountered, but will be part of what I think and what I remembered and what sparked something else. And I think what comes with that needs to be in tandem with what AI allows us to do so that we can amplify and augment everything, but certainly not replace it entirely. And I think looking at your question, why intuition, judgment, psychology becomes the real competitive edge, because I think at the moment we're at the risk of them becoming less and less commonly used. I think people are potentially falling into a trap where they are getting a bit cognitively lazy and therefore not using their judgment as much as they should, particularly when they are using AI. They sort of outsource a little bit too far. And I think there'll come a point, maybe it's already here, when people appreciate human judgment, empathy, resilience, as we were talking about before, more and more, because it feels rarer or more rare, because we're doing so much that doesn't have it in place that when it is in place, people notice it more and think, oh my goodness, that's refreshing. That person's really empathetic and I can feel it and I can see it and I can touch it. And I haven't had that for a bit today because I've been working with my agent that isn't as empathetic or resilient. And that might change. I say all of this with a huge caveat that could change rapidly. And we might feel that everything that is lacking now with AI is not lacking with AI in 6 months to a year's time. But I think people will, there's always a counter trend, a counter movement. And I think the counter movement with AI will be that people revert somewhat to going and doing something with their hands, and finding very human, real conversations. And like I said in my article, like having that element that you simply cannot replace with any sort of machine thinking, because it has to be face to face and it has to be in a small community of only humans and it has to be physical. So when it comes to businesses, I think that is where you can differentiate, because there's a point that is coming now where everything is open to everyone. And therefore finding your point of difference is becoming very, very hard, because it's possible. It's all possible. But when everything becomes possible, I think potentially end up raising the floor, not the ceiling. And in order to raise the ceiling, you have to revert to individual feelings, emotions, ability to say things in a different way with humanity.
Okay. So basically, you do agree. So the question, okay, this is super interesting territory, right?
Yeah.
I know you agree. You wrote article about the behavior that we start missing, and that is going next door, going to your neighbor home and just borrowing the simple cup of coffee, a cup of whatever, coffee,
Sugar.
tea, whatever. And it's universal across the Europe. I'm sure in US is pretty much the same. It's just a neighbor to neighbor. You feel comfortable borrowing what's most essential, right? And that is what makes us start thinking about that. How can we bring this into the business? Which those traits has been removed from. Now we're talking about long 20th century. The revolutions and technological evolutions has make us remove that, moving to the cities, etc., leaving agriculture behind and moving to the large cities, where those kind of behaviors are this instinct. So going back to those, just at an individual level, literally knowing your neighbor, knocking on the door and asking, hey, do you have a beer to borrow, whatever, will be new again.
Yeah.
Scaling this up at a business level, at the business model level, I will start from business model level, it will create new kind of businesses that we all really want.
Yeah.
Going back to the original of this conversation makes probably all business people very uncomfortable with the idea of lowering the standards and going after what we really are. Basically, what I'm saying, the future is very much like our path.
Yeah. That's a whole other episode. But yeah, I mean, things are cyclical. I think you take examples like organic vegetables that we all now pay an awful lot of money for. But guess what? Everyone grew them without any of the chemicals that we pay not to have for hundreds of years, and now has become a indulgence. I think the future is the past. It often is. It goes in waves, as we know. But I think that whether those kind of behaviors and human needs will be scaled is a huge question. I think they should be scaled. I think you only need to have conversations with people to realize that we're all hungry for it. And therefore, if we're all hungry for it, surely there's the need already there, and surely everyone will be open to it. But when you put it into a business context, are people open to it? I still think, as much as we've all blurred the boundaries of our personal and professional lives, I still think there will be a resistance to taking those human ways of being and practices that we've lost. So I wrote about the village, or the art of thinking like a village, that we've lost, putting them into a work environment, and I think you'll rub up against some difficulty. I don't think you should, but I think you will, because I think people, when they're in a business environment context, are sometimes overt different versions of themselves, and sometimes subtly different versions of themselves, but they are there to do a certain job, a certain task. They'll focus on doing that. They won't necessarily therefore open up to all of their human desires in that context. But that's, I think, when it gets really powerful. When it's at that point where people are slightly uncomfortable about it and think, God, I don't know if I'd do that in the office. Why would I do that? But when they do, and they realize it has returns, and I don't mean in terms of financial, in terms of people, being vulnerable allows someone else to be vulnerable. Asking for help without judgment allows people to go, oh my goodness, I can do that. And actually, they just helped, and now I can do it. And it starts a bit of a ripple effect. But having a conversation, I have a senior leader I work with all the time. And I remember when I first started working with him, I showed him so many presentations, and he was like, Emily, stop communicating with me in terms of presentations. Stop it. Have a conversation with me. Just come and pull me to one side and have a conversation. Now, he's pretty senior, so I didn't think he had the time for that. But it's much better now that I do. And I'm like, can I just please ask you a question? Or I actually know what I'm doing with this one. Can you help, please? It took trust. Of course, it took trust. But now the output is very much better, and our working relationship is very much better. So I think there's many things we can take from what we used to do that we can do more of. Having a chat rather than sending an email. asking for help willingly without thinking that's going to show
Yeah.
me as weak. All of the other elements,
Yeah.
and helping other people understand that we're all different, sure, but we're also very similar, all of us. And I think when you say things out loud that you're struggling with or you're particularly enjoying, you'll find a lot of people that are thinking somewhat the same, and that creates a community in itself.
Yeah. I think community is the way to go. Different kind of communities that we have these days. We have professional communities. I think we are moving more of the gilded age,
Mm.
gilded societies, right? But I also think that we have a mechanism in us that's a primary mechanism that is much stronger than mechanism that we're using right now to socialize and build, to drive the business through our social. It's just more effective. It's like that's who we are much better to run the businesses, run the companies, run the brains, experiences, whatever services through this at the social norms than pushing it toward the market norms.
Mm.
So I truly believe that is the case. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's where we're coming from. I think what it takes and the reason why we prefer the society the way it is right now, because it's frictionless.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
easy, right? It removes any subjectivities, removes what you're saying, talking to your boss. Like there's a distance between presentation and you and the boss. There's a formality, right? And that's easier to keep that layer between us, a protective layer, right?
Yeah, very
Um,
much.
then really be take entire responsibility, social responsibility, and embrace in a contact, I will say.
Yeah, but it also preserves the status quo a little bit. Having that
Yes. Oh
distance,
yeah.
people take security in. Keeping things the same feels better, but often isn't. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's exactly what you should do, but often just keeping things the same always is the biggest risk you can take because things will evolve around you. And if you've stayed the same, that risk becomes huge and something that you never thought would snowball into that risk if you'd just done incremental changes. But yeah, there is, I mean, I do it. To my husband's uh, delight, the opposite of delight, horror, that's the one. I'm a big fan of voice notes. I send long ones to my friends and they send long ones to me. And he's like, oh, for goodness sake, pick up the phone, Am. I'm like, no, because then I have to make sure that they're available and time is short and we're not. So we swap voice notes.
Yeah.
And I don't
It's
think
way
that
different.
that's for me, especially with my friends, it's not wanting distance from them. It's just not having to schedule something that I have to find a gap for. It's spontaneous. And if I find them on the phone, it's great, but we very rarely get time at the same time. But I do it with emails. I'll send a lot of emails rather than necessarily picking up the phone. And I'm fully aware that that doesn't always give the best result. It can protect you because someone can think about it or it feels less, I guess, immediate if you send an email rather than have a conversation. But you also can't look into that person's eyes and figure out what they're actually thinking if you send an email or send a voice note. Whereas if you're in front of them, you often can, if you can read someone, if they hesitate or if they look at you like you've just said something rather stupid that they possibly don't agree with you.
I will insert these, which is for whatever reason. I have a good reason why I was watching this video yesterday, just yesterday, it was Sunday. I was watching the one, probably almost 20 years old video of Daniel Kahneman talking about this. So I want to give him a credit, but it was the definition of it is what you're describing right now. I'm just going off the tangent here. And definition was delayed intuition. If you have, I mean, I was like, what
Yeah.
are you talking about? And he's saying if you're making decisions, which
Yeah.
email allows to make decisions, to think about. It's like an email is goes, think about, so think about this, read your email 2, 3 times, it's
Yeah.
important, and then thoughtfully respond. It delays our first judgment of the call, which you're saying, oh, I don't think she was in good mood. I think
Yeah.
she said that, and things
Yeah.
so it's like you making it up, making you building your intuition based on something that is and decisions based on something that is not alike, while you're having a written, rational left brain thoughts. It delays your building of your intuition.
It's so true. There's a reason why you talk about your gut feel, right? It's, related to the fight flight. If you feel butterflies in your tummy, there's a reason. There's a physical
Yeah.
reason that you're
Yeah. Oh,
feeling it.
yeah.
You sometimes need to listen to it. When you're writing an email, you often don't get butterflies. Well, sometimes you do. But yeah, you're right. So you push or delay or sometimes even bury your intuition and your judgment, which is risky in itself because you aren't necessarily responding how you actually want to respond. Sometimes I should say, it's entirely necessary. Because if you
Yeah.
think when you respond in a heightened state of emotion, or you're really pissed off about something and then you wrote an email, it wouldn't be the best move. But,
Or it is.
or maybe it is. Maybe that would set in motion something that wouldn't have been set in motion before. And I think part of it is it goes back to slightly reading the room and slightly knowing when you should and when you shouldn't, or when you can't help but. There's moments that everyone has them when you're just like, I can't stay quiet with this going on. I'm going to have to say something. And it might not be perfectly poised and it might not be the best way to articulate it, but I'm still going to have to say something because otherwise it feels so against what I think and who I am that it's going to cause more harm. But yes, we have gone off on a tangent, but it's all relevant,
That's okay. Yeah. Oh,
with
yeah.
with so much technology, with everything around us, are we burying our human instincts? Potentially, sometimes.
I mean, okay, well, let's build this argument a little bit. I think my theory, what I'm saying for a very long time now, and I blame myself in believing in my own theory, start
Mm.
believing in my own theory that we are bearing our own feelings and emotions and part of our what our true strength really is. We're bearing it for way too long. For now,
Yeah.
we're building it for the centuries, a few centuries or more, right? And there's a skill called stoicism, right?
Yeah.
All those things. Now, with the accelerated technology, AI, we all going to be pushed on the side and saying, hey, that machine does this much better than you do. What is left is go back to your true skills, to your true muscles,
Yeah.
to build
Yeah.
that new society that we need to build. And you know that could happen in 20 years, but I think actually it's going to happen much faster because of the acceleration of technology. Just literally going to be pushed into it, to
Yeah.
communities, into
Yeah.
different kind of business model. And we see this. We see the global success.
I think what you just said then about, machines can do it so much better than us. There are some elements that they can by a long way. I've got friends that are now pushing into kind of defense through AI, medicine with AI, and what is possible is astounding. And without human error and
Oh
everything
yeah,
else it can be. And in my job, there are elements when you should absolutely lean into the technology that it can do it better than us, but not without us in some respects. And yeah, it comes back to the what we're good at. But also you have to know what you're good at. And I think some people don't necessarily know it or haven't got to know it yet.
right. You're talking about, yeah. I mean, the most vulnerable ones are really young ones, right? The kids that are
Yeah,
growing.
because they haven't had time to fully explore, build the muscle in the first place. So how do they use it to its full strength if they haven't been able to use it?
It's the most exciting time to be alive right now in entire humanity, right?
Yeah.
It's having experiences that we carry through, it's like working on projects, completely absence of AI, and truly like a working through the building a businesses and working on the Wall Street and working it's like a generation of people that is still living, that going to be extinct in some short period of time.
Mm.
We are the one who's supposed to carry these to the generation that will not ever have that kind of experiences.
No, but they will have their own. And I also think that I'm going to say they, like generalizing hugely, young people, younger people that are born into a slightly different world than we were, will find their own counter trends and muscles to grow that we never did. And hopefully take it off in a different direction as well and have their own experiences. That complement what exists now and pull it in a whole different direction. And we don't know. Everything continues to change. If it's all cyclical, who knows what's going to happen in 50 years? Might have come full circle and we'll all be writing each other letters again and going nowhere near our computers.
Yeah, borrowing a cup of sugar from your neighbor.
Exactly. And flying it to one another with a drone instead.
Cool. So I really want to thank you for these.
My pleasure. It's been
And I think we should talk again